The studio lights beamed brightly over the CNN newsroom, illuminating the tense atmosphere that had settled over the set. Millions of viewers had tuned in, anticipating what was expected to be a fiery exchange between CNN's seasoned host, Kate Baldwin, and the spokesperson for Donald Trump's 2024 campaign, Karoline Leavitt. The debate topic of the night was a highly controversial issue: immigration policies and the use of disaster relief funds to manage the growing crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. Kate Baldwin, known for her sharp interviewing style and ability to corner her guests, was fully prepared to challenge Karoline, setting the stage for a combative discussion. Across from her, Karoline sat poised, confident, and unafraid of confrontation, ready to defend Trump's policies and take on CNN's narrative. Kate wasted no time. She leaned in slightly, her tone sharp yet neutral, signaling she was about to deliver a loaded question. "Let's get right to it," she said, flipping through her notes. In 2019, the Trump administration used disaster relief funds to manage immigration. Now the Biden administration is doing the same. So why is it that your campaign is criticizing Biden for something Trump did himself? The trap was set. Kate framed the question to force Karoline into a contradiction. Either defend Trump's past actions, which would make it difficult to attack Biden, or admit hypocrisy, which would weaken her argument entirely. The audience waited. Kate's expression remained neutral, but her eyes were sharp, watching Karoline carefully, looking for any hesitation, any sign of struggle. But Karoline didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled slightly, adjusted her microphone, and delivered a counterattack with precision. "Kate, the difference is crystal clear. In 2019, President Trump was dealing with a border crisis created by Obama's weak policies. He used every tool available to secure our nation. That is completely different from what we're seeing now." Kate raised an eyebrow, sensing that Karoline was not going to be easily cornered. "But at the core, isn't it the same action?" she pressed. "Both administrations used disaster relief funds for immigration control." Karoline's voice remained calm, but firm. "The key difference, Kate, is control. Trump enforced border laws while Biden dismantled them. Trump deported illegal migrants. Biden is putting them up in luxury hotels at taxpayer expense. That's not leadership. That's a disaster of his own making." The audience murmured. Kate realized that Karoline was not just answering the question, she was dominating the exchange. Baldwin had expected a defensive response, but instead she was facing a highly prepared and aggressive opponent. Refusing to let Karoline take control, Kate pressed forward, shifting her approach. "So you're saying the Biden administration has no control over immigration?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I'm saying Biden has completely failed," Karoline shot back. "Under Trump, illegal crossings plummeted. Under Biden, we've seen over 5 million illegal entries in just 2 years. That's not control, Kate. That's a catastrophe." Kate took a calm breath, realizing she had to keep pressing harder. She knew this wasn't going her way so far. She had to redirect the conversation, attack Trump's policies instead. But in 2019, Trump also faced massive immigration waves. He was also criticized for holding migrants in poor conditions. Why was it right under Trump but wrong under Biden? It was a clever attack. Kate was now trying to force Karoline into defending something controversial, hoping she would stumble or contradict herself. But Karoline was prepared. "The difference," she said smoothly, "is that Trump wasn't rewarding illegal immigration. He secured agreements with Mexico, expanded the Remain in Mexico policy, built the border wall. Most importantly, he never encouraged illegal migrants to flood our country." Kate's jaw tightened slightly. Karoline wasn't budging. Instead, she was pushing the argument back onto Biden, making it clear that Trump's policies were proactive, while Biden's were reactive. Kate exhaled through her nose, adjusting her strategy. If attacking Trump's policies wasn't working, maybe she could undermine Karoline's credibility instead. She leaned back, creating an aura of detachment and authority. "Karoline, let's be clear," she said, her tone shifting. "The Trump administration held migrants in conditions that humanitarian groups condemned. Detention centers were overcrowded. Children were separated from their families. So, if Biden is mishandling immigration, wasn't Trump guilty of the same?" Karoline let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "Kate, Do you know what's worse than a crowded detention center? She asked, her voice sharp. Kate didn't respond. An open border where drug cartels and human traffickers run wild, where American towns are flooded with fentanyl, where criminals cross freely because this administration refuses to enforce our laws. Kate's expression remained composed, but the tension in the room was rising. This was not going as planned. Caroline turned to the camera, her voice unwavering. The American people need to ask themselves, do we want a country with no borders? Do we want to pay higher taxes to support illegal migrants? Do we want criminals walking in unchecked? Because if the answer is no, then we need to remove this administration now. Boom. The studio stirred. Kate could feel the tide shifting. This debate was not going as she had envisioned. She had to regain control, and fast. Taking a sharp breath, she sat up straighter. Let's focus, Caroline, she said, her voice firmer. My question was about Trump's policies, not Biden's failures. Can you answer directly, why was it acceptable under Trump but not under Biden? It was a trap reset. Kate wanted Caroline to circle back, to contradict herself. But Caroline wasn't playing. Kate, the American people see through this game. Biden turned a crisis into a catastrophe. Trump tried to stop it. That's the answer. Silence. Kate realized she was losing this battle. But she wasn't giving up. She would push harder. The tension in the room thickened. The audience, initially just passive viewers, now hung onto every word. The battle had only just begun. Caroline Leavitt had walked into the CNN studio fully aware of what awaited her. She knew Kate Baldwin's reputation. Tough, aggressive, and relentless when it came to putting conservatives on the defensive. But Caroline was not just any campaign spokesperson. She was young, confident, and completely unafraid of confrontation. If Kate thought she could push her into a corner with tricky questions and loaded comparisons, she was about to realize she had severely underestimated her opponent. From the moment the interview began, Caroline had been prepared for the opening attack. The expected attempt to paint Trump's policies as no different from Biden's. But she had anticipated this and had an immediate response ready. While Kate tried to frame the use of disaster relief funds as a contradiction between administrations, Caroline swiftly dismantled the argument. She countered with a clear distinction. Trump used the funds to solve a crisis, while Biden used them to cover up his administration's failure. The key difference, Kate, is control. Trump enforced border laws while Biden dismantled them. Trump deported illegal migrants. Biden is putting them up in luxury hotels at taxpayer expense. That's not leadership. That's a disaster of his own making. She made it impossible to equate the two situations, forcing Kate onto shaky ground. Kate tried to regain her footing, attempting to push Caroline into a contradiction by pointing out that Trump had also faced immigration surges in 2019 and was criticized for the conditions in detention centers. It was an obvious trap, meant to make Caroline either justify something Trump had been attacked for or admit that Biden's situation wasn't entirely different. But Caroline wasn't fazed. Instead of backing down, she flipped the narrative on its head. The difference is that Trump wasn't rewarding illegal immigration. He secured agreements with Mexico, expanded the Remain in Mexico policy, and built the border wall. Most importantly, he never encouraged illegal migrants to flood our country. It was a sharp, calculated response that not only defended Trump's record, but highlighted Biden's failures. She wasn't playing defense, she was going on offense. The tension in the room thickened as Kate's frustration became more evident. She leaned in, trying to land a definitive blow. Caroline, let's be clear. The Trump administration held migrants in conditions that humanitarian groups condemned. Detention centers were overcrowded. Children were separated from their families. So if Biden is mishandling immigration, wasn't Trump guilty of the same? Kate was hoping for hesitation, for a stumble, for even a slight moment of doubt. But Caroline delivered one of the most devastating counterpunches of the debate. With a slight smirk, she responded, Kate, do you know what's worse than a crowded detention center? Kate didn't respond. Caroline didn't wait for her to. An open border where drug cartels and human traffickers run wild, where American towns are flooded with fentanyl, where criminals cross freely because this administration refuses to enforce our laws. The statement hit hard. She wasn't just addressing policy, she was making the crisis real, tangible, something that every American watching at home could picture and fear. Kate exhaled slowly, realizing that the standard attacks weren't working. Caroline wasn't reacting like a typical guest. She wasn't trying to defend past decisions. She was forcing Kate to acknowledge the present failures of the Biden administration. The debate was slipping away from Kate, and she knew it. In a last attempt to push Caroline into admitting a flaw in Trump's immigration policies, she took a different approach. Let's make this simple, Caroline. You keep saying Biden created this crisis, but fact, Trump also faced a border surge in 2019. Trump also used disaster relief funds. Are you saying it was right when he did it, but wrong when Biden did it? It was a blunt, direct attack, the kind of question designed to leave no wiggle room, to demand a clear answer with no space for maneuvering. But Caroline didn't hesitate for even a second. She sat up straighter, her confidence unshaken, and delivered one of the most powerful moments of the night. Kate, let me ask you this. When a firefighter puts out a fire, is that the same as an arsonist setting one? The studio stirred. The audience reaction was immediate, murmurs spreading across the room. Kate's smile tightened slightly. I'm not sure I follow, she said, though she absolutely understood the implication. Caroline didn't let the moment slip away. Trump used emergency funds to fix a crisis. Biden is using them to fund one. That's the difference. The impact was instant. It wasn't just a strong rebuttal. It was a reframing of the entire argument. She had not only dismissed the idea that Trump and Biden's actions were the same, she had turned it into an indictment of Biden's failures. Kate tried to push forward, attempting to shift the topic to migrant conditions again. But under Trump, migrant children were held in poor conditions. Many were separated from their families. If Biden's approach is wrong, what makes Trump's policies right? Another trap, but Caroline was already 2 steps ahead. Kate, let's be honest here. The reason there were migrant children in detention centers was because their parents brought them here illegally. Kate opened her mouth to interject, but Caroline kept going, her voice unwavering. Trump enforced immigration law. That's what a leader does. Biden has encouraged illegal crossings. That's what a weak leader does. And now, we don't just have a border crisis. We have human trafficking, fentanyl flooding into American cities, and cartels making millions thanks to Biden's policies. The momentum was shifting hard, and Kate could feel it. She needed to regain control, but every attempt to redirect the conversation, to set a trap, to force Caroline into a contradiction had failed. The audience could see it. For the first time, Kate hesitated. Caroline didn't. Kate, the American people see through this game. Biden turned a crisis into a catastrophe. Trump tried to stop it. That's the answer. The silence in the studio spoke volumes. Kate was losing control of the debate, and she knew it. The frustration was creeping in, but she had one last move. Escalation. She had to push harder. She had to regain her authority before it was too late. As she straightened her posture, preparing to take the interview to the next level, the audience watching at home could feel it. This debate was only getting started, and neither woman was willing to back down. The battle had just entered a new phase, and Kate Baldwin was about to realize that Karoline Leavitt wasn't just deflecting attacks. She was winning the war of words. Kate Baldwin could feel the debate slipping from her grasp. Every attempt to corner Karoline Leavitt had failed. Every trap she set had been dismantled with a sharp, confident response. Caroline wasn't just holding her ground, she was dominating the exchange, flipping every question back on Kate and exposing the weaknesses in the Biden administration's immigration policies. The tension in the studio was thick, the audience completely drawn into the battle of words unfolding before them. Kate, a seasoned CNN host known for her ability to control interviews, was finding herself in an unfamiliar position, on the defensive. Her body language shifted subtly, her smile tightening, her patience thinning. She needed to regain control, and she needed to do it fast. She took a sharp breath and went for a direct escalation. Caroline, I'm going to ask you one more time, she said, her tone sharper than before. You keep dodging my question. If Trump wins in 2024, will there be mass deportations, yes or no? It was a last-ditch effort to force Caroline into a politically dangerous statement. If Caroline said yes, it would sound extreme and unrealistic. If she said no, it would undermine Trump's tough-on-immigration stance. Either way, Kate was banking on the fact that Caroline would finally stumble, giving her an opening to regain control. But Caroline didn't blink. She exhaled slowly, then leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with Kate in a way that made it clear she was not about to be bullied into a misstep. "Kate, I find it funny how the media loves asking conservatives for yes or no answers, yet never holds Democrats to the same standard," she said, her tone cool and deliberate. Where was this energy when Joe Biden refused to say whether he would pack the Supreme Court? Where was this energy when Kamala Harris refused to answer if she supported open borders? Boom. The audience reaction was immediate. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Kate hadn't expected the attack to be reversed so effectively. She opened her mouth, trying to come up with a quick response, but Caroline wasn't finished. "I just gave you the answer, Kate. Trump will restore law and order. He will enforce immigration laws, and he will stop rewarding illegal crossings. If that's too complicated for CNN to understand, that's not my problem." For the first time in the debate, Kate hesitated. The camera caught the pause, and everyone watching at home could see it. This was not how the interview was supposed to go. Caroline had completely turned the narrative around, and CNN's host was on the ropes. Behind the cameras, producers frantically communicated through earpieces, trying to salvage the segment. This was spiraling into a PR disaster for CNN, and they knew it. Kate's frustration finally broke through. She straightened her posture, her expression sharpening as she made a dramatic decision. "All right, Caroline," she said, her voice firm. "I have given you multiple chances to directly answer this question, but all I'm getting is political spin. We're ending this interview." And with that, she turned to the camera. "We'll be right back." Cut to commercial. The studio fell into complete silence. The tension was palpable, thick like a storm cloud hanging over the set. Caroline sat motionless in her chair, her lips slightly parted, as if she had more to say, but the opportunity had just been ripped away from her. She had been cut off, live on national television. Kate gripped her cue cards tightly, avoiding eye contact with Caroline. Her body language was tense, her movements slightly rigid. She was trying to maintain composure, but the truth was, she knew this wasn't a clean victory. Ending an interview mid-sentence was never a good look. It sent a clear message to viewers that CNN had lost control. As the seconds passed, the weight of the moment settled over the room. Caroline let the silence linger for a few moments longer. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, she unhooked her microphone, set it down on the table, and stood up. She shook her head slightly, letting out a quiet but pointed remark. "Wow. I guess CNN only likes answers that fit their narrative." Kate glanced up quickly, her jaw tightening. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but before she could, Caroline turned and walked off the set. And then, the internet exploded. Within minutes, social media was in full meltdown mode. Clips of the debate, especially the moment CNN cut Caroline off, spread like wildfire across Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. The hashtag Caroline vs. CNN skyrocketed to the #1 trending topic, with users taking sides in what was quickly becoming a media firestorm. Conservatives immediately pounced on the moment, rallying behind Caroline and calling it proof of CNN's blatant bias. Fox News hosts went live within the hour, declaring it a major media scandal. "CNN just cut off Caroline Leavitt mid-sentence because she was winning," one commentator tweeted. "Absolute media bias at its finest." Others followed with similar takes. "Kate Baldwin just got destroyed on live TV and had to pull the plug to save herself." What a joke. This is why Americans don't trust mainstream media. When the argument doesn't go their way, they shut it down. But liberal voices pushed back, arguing that Caroline had been dodging questions and refusing to give a straight answer. Caroline never answered the question. She dodged, deflected, and refused to engage, one CNN analyst posted. Kate had every right to shut it down. Another tweet read, "This isn't media bias. This is what happens when someone refuses to answer direct questions." The battle lines were drawn, but one thing was undeniable. CNN had just walked into a PR nightmare. Inside CNN's headquarters, executives and producers scrambled to contain the fallout. The newsroom was buzzing with tension as management held emergency meetings. Kate sat in the green room rubbing her temples as her phone buzzed relentlessly. She knew how this looked. Ending an interview mid-sentence was never a good move, especially when it made it seem like CNN couldn't handle their guest. A producer walked in, looking tense. "We're getting killed online," he said, shaking his head. Kate sighed. "I had to do it," she insisted. She wasn't answering the question. The producer exhaled sharply. "Yeah, well, now everyone thinks we censored her because we were losing." Meanwhile, over at Trump's campaign headquarters, the reaction was completely different. Caroline sat in front of her laptop watching the clips of her debate rack up millions of views. She smirked as she scrolled through the reactions. A campaign advisor leaned over her shoulder. "CNN just handed us the best campaign ad we could ask for." Caroline didn't disagree. A few moments later, she hit send on her own response. "CNN couldn't handle the truth, so they cut me off. The American people see right through their bias. Caroline, CNN." Within minutes, the tweet had over 500,000 likes and tens of thousands of shares. And then, Trump himself retweeted it, adding only 3 words. Perfect example, fake news. With that, the controversy was cemented. CNN hadn't just lost the debate in the studio, they had lost in the court of public opinion. The moment the CNN interview was cut off mid-sentence, the internet erupted into chaos. Within seconds, clips of the debate spread across social media platforms like wildfire. The hashtag #CarolineVCNN skyrocketed to the #1 trending topic on Twitter, with thousands of users flooding the platform to weigh in on the controversy. The divide was immediate, stark, and impossible to ignore. Conservatives hailed Caroline Leavitt as a fighter who had exposed CNN's bias, while liberals accused her of dodging questions and playing the victim when she wasn't given unlimited airtime. No matter which side people were on, one thing was certain: everyone was talking about what had just happened, and CNN had inadvertently turned their interview into the most discussed political moment of the week. Conservative media outlets wasted no time amplifying the controversy. Within an hour of the broadcast, Fox News ran breaking news segments, analyzing the moment frame by frame. Hosts like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson openly mocked CNN's decision to cut off Caroline, claiming it was undeniable proof that the liberal media couldn't handle opposing viewpoints. "CNN just cut off Caroline Leavitt mid-sentence because she was winning," Hannity declared on his show. "This is absolute media bias at its finest." Other conservative commentators followed suit, with posts flooding social media. Kate Baldwin just got destroyed on live TV and had to pull the plug to save herself. This is why Americans don't trust mainstream media. When the argument doesn't go their way, they shut it down. But liberals weren't about to let the moment pass uncontested. Within the same hour, CNN defenders and left-leaning media figures pushed back, arguing that Caroline's refusal to answer direct questions was the real issue. "Caroline never answered the question," one CNN analyst posted on Twitter. "She dodged, deflected, and refused to engage. Kate had every right to shut it down." Another tweet read, "This isn't media bias. This is what happens when someone refuses to answer direct questions." Liberal commentators on MSNBC and The Washington Post claimed that CNN's decision to cut the interview short was an act of journalistic integrity rather than an attempt to silence opposition. "The media doesn't exist to be a punching bag for political operatives," one columnist wrote. "If a guest refuses to provide clear answers, an interviewer has every right to end the conversation." Despite the left's defense, the optics of the situation were brutal for CNN. The clip of Caroline being cut off was everywhere. It was on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and even TikTok. Millions of people watched it, and even neutral observers couldn't ignore how bad it looked. It didn't matter if CNN's justification made sense to its supporters. The average viewer saw a network cutting off a guest simply because they didn't like the answers she was giving. The perception of censorship was stronger than any attempt to control the narrative. Even some journalists who typically leaned left admitted that CNN's move was a mistake. A Media Insider report noted, "Regardless of your political views, cutting an interview mid-sentence always creates the impression of bias. CNN just handed conservatives an easy win." Meanwhile, at Trump's campaign headquarters, the team couldn't believe their luck. The moment Caroline walked off the CNN set, Her phone was buzzing non-stop with messages from fellow campaign officials, conservative influencers, and media outlets begging for interviews. She sat in a conference room, scrolling through Twitter, watching her name dominate every trending topic. A campaign strategist leaned over her shoulder, shaking his head in amazement. "CNN just gave us the best campaign ad we could ask for," he said. Caroline smirked, typing out a response. Moments later, she hit send on a tweet that immediately went viral. "CNN couldn't handle the truth, so they cut me off. The American people see right through their bias. Caroline V." Within minutes, her tweet had over 500,000 likes and tens of thousands of shares. And then Trump himself retweeted it. He added only 3 words: "Perfect example, fake news." That single retweet cemented the narrative. This wasn't just about an interview gone wrong, it was about the battle between conservatives and the media, the ongoing fight against fake news, and the deep mistrust that millions of Americans had in CNN and other mainstream outlets. As conservative support for Caroline continued to grow, CNN scrambled to contain the damage. The network issued an official statement, trying to justify its decision. "CNN stands by our commitment to fair and balanced journalism," the statement read. "Our hosts expect direct and factual answers from their guests. When that standard is not met, we reserve the right to end the segment." This was not censorship. This was editorial integrity. But the problem was, no one was buying it. Conservatives dismissed the statement outright, pointing to Caroline's decisive performance and CNN's awkward exit strategy as evidence of liberal media bias. Even some independent commentators saw CNN's justification as weak. "This was a terrible move for CNN," one political analyst said on a news podcast. "Cutting a guest off when they're winning an argument never looks good. They should have let the debate play out." The battle raged on across all platforms, turning Caroline Leavitt into an overnight conservative icon. Fox News lined up exclusive interviews, conservative influencers promoted her across social media, and Trump's campaign wasted no time capitalizing on the moment. By the time morning came, the story had only grown bigger. CNN wasn't just losing a debate anymore, they were losing in the court of public opinion, and Caroline, once just a campaign spokesperson, had become a national political force overnight. CNN executives knew they had a problem the moment the segment cut to commercial. The newsroom was in chaos, producers whispering into headsets, social media managers frantically refreshing Twitter, and senior editors scrambling to contain the fallout. The abrupt decision to cut off Caroline Leavitt mid-sentence had ignited a firestorm, and it wasn't just conservatives who were calling them out. Even neutral media analysts were questioning whether CNN had made a major miscalculation. Ending an interview mid-sentence always looked bad, but doing so when the guest appeared to be winning the argument made it look even worse. The perception was clear. CNN had lost control, and rather than let Caroline continue dismantling their narrative, they had chosen to silence her. The network was now in full damage control mode. Kate Baldwin sat in the green room, her arms crossed, staring at her phone as messages poured in. The segment producers entered with tense expressions. "This is bad," one of them muttered. "The reaction online is brutal." Kate let out a slow breath, rubbing her temples. "I had to do it," she insisted. She was dodging the question. "I wasn't going to let her keep spinning the same talking points without answering directly." But it didn't matter how she justified it. The public had already made up their minds. A producer handed her a printed statement from CNN's public relations team. "We're issuing this immediately." Kate scanned the paper. "CNN stands by our commitment to fair and balanced journalism. Our hosts expect direct and factual answers from their guests. When that standard is not met, we reserve the right to end the segment." This was not censorship. This was editorial integrity. Kate sighed. "No one's going to buy this." And she was right. The statement was released, but within minutes it was being ripped apart online. Conservatives dismissed it as damage control, calling it proof that CNN couldn't handle real debate. Even some moderate journalists admitted it looked like a panic move. A Media Insider report summed up the problem perfectly. Regardless of your politics, cutting an interview mid-sentence always creates the impression of bias. CNN just handed conservatives an easy win. Meanwhile, at Trump's campaign headquarters, the team was celebrating. Karoline Leavitt's name was trending nationwide, and her viral tweet, "CNN couldn't handle the truth, so they cut me off. The American people see right through their bias," had already amassed over 500,000 likes. Then Trump himself retweeted it, adding, "Perfect example, fake news." That one move cemented the moment in political history. As CNN executives tried to shift focus, the headlines kept getting worse. Fox News ran non-stop coverage. Conservative outlets framed it as CNN censors conservative voice, and even independent commentators started to question whether CNN had destroyed its own credibility. Internal meetings at CNN were tense. Senior executives debated whether Kate should go on air to defend the decision or whether it was better to let the story die down. The problem was, it wasn't dying down. The internet was keeping it alive, with video clips of the interview racking up millions of views. Even CNN's loyal viewers started questioning the move. Polls showed trust in the network had dropped further, with a survey revealing that among independents, trust in CNN fell from 32% to 26% overnight. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt's political profile skyrocketed. Conservative media hailed her as the rising star of the movement, and Trump's campaign quickly capitalized on the moment, securing high-profile interviews for her and making sure she remained in the headlines. CNN had intended to shut her down. Instead, they had made her a political sensation. As the dust settled, one thing was clear. CNN hadn't just lost control of an interview, they had lost control of the narrative itself. Karoline Leavitt had walked into the CNN interview as a campaign spokesperson, but by the time she walked out, she had become a political force. What was meant to be a tough grilling session had backfired spectacularly on CNN, and Karoline had turned the moment into a personal victory. As the video clips of her exchange with Kate Baldwin went viral, conservative media outlets rallied behind her. Fox News lined up exclusive interviews, and even neutral analysts admitted that CNN's decision to cut her off mid-sentence had only made her more powerful. Within hours, her Twitter following exploded, her name was trending nationwide, and campaign strategists took immediate notice. Instead of being just another media appearance, this had become the defining moment of her career. Back at Trump's campaign headquarters, the energy was electric. Senior advisors huddled around screens, watching the clip rack up millions of views, shaking their heads in amazement. "CNN just handed us a political gift," one strategist said, unable to hide his grin. Karoline, sitting at the table, casually scrolled through Twitter. Her mentions flooded with praise, support, and messages from conservative influencers who were now eager to amplify her voice. A campaign aide leaned over. "We need to capitalize on this fast. Trump's team wants you on Hannity tonight." Karoline didn't hesitate. "Book it," she said. She knew this was her moment, and she wasn't going to waste it. That night, Sean Hannity opened his show with a fiery monologue. "Folks, last night on CNN, we saw exactly why Americans don't trust the mainstream media. Karoline Leavitt went on their network and completely destroyed their narrative. And what did CNN do when they couldn't handle it? They cut her off." The clip from CNN played on the screen, showing Kate Baldwin abruptly ending the interview. The optics were undeniable. It didn't matter what CNN's justification was. The public perception was that they had silenced Karoline because she was winning. Hannity leaned forward. "Karoline is here with us tonight. Let's hear what really happened." Karoline appeared on the screen, poised, confident, and fully in control of her message. "Sean, it's very simple," she said. "CNN couldn't handle the truth, so they shut me down. They don't want a real debate. They want total control over the narrative, but the American people aren't buying it anymore." The interview instantly went viral, and conservative networks couldn't get enough. The next day, Laura Ingraham, Tucker Carlson, and Newsmax all lined up interviews, each one solidifying her status as a rising conservative voice. Meanwhile, Trump's campaign saw an opportunity and moved quickly to elevate her role. Just days after the CNN controversy, the campaign announced that Karoline Leavitt would lead media strategy for Trump 2024. The announcement sent a shockwave through political circles. What had started as a single CNN debate had now catapulted her into national prominence. She was no longer just a spokesperson, she was a new face of the movement. Across the aisle, liberal media scrambled to counter the momentum, with MSNBC hosts downplaying her rise, calling her a media manipulator who had spun a non-story into conservative outrage. "Let's be clear," one MSNBC analyst said, "this is not about CNN silencing someone. It's about a well-trained political operative dodging questions and then playing the victim when the interview was rightfully ended." But it didn't matter what they said. The momentum was already in full swing, and conservatives had a new champion. Caroline continued to dominate headlines, and it wasn't just conservative media taking notice. Major newspapers like the New York Times and Politico ran articles analyzing her sudden rise to national fame. "How CNN Turned Caroline Leavitt into a Conservative Star," one headline read. Another piece on Axios declared, "The right has found its new fighter, and she's just getting started." Meanwhile, polling data showed that Republican voters recognized her name more than ever, and her approval ratings surged among Trump supporters. At a rally in Florida, Trump himself addressed the controversy, grinning as he gestured to the crowd. "You all saw what happened, right? Caroline went on CNN, completely exposed them, and what did they do? They cut her off because they couldn't handle it." The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting, "Fake news! Fake news!" as Caroline stood beside Trump, smiling. She had just become a political sensation, and CNN had helped make it happen. As the dust settled, one thing was clear. Caroline Leavitt wasn't just another campaign staffer anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. The media firestorm surrounding her interview had transformed her into a national figure, and Trump's campaign wasted no time putting her front and center. CNN had hoped to discredit her. Instead, they had amplified her influence. And as the battle between conservatives in the media raged on, Caroline was more than ready to keep fighting. The CNN controversy wasn't just about one interview. It was a flashpoint in the ongoing war between conservatives and the mainstream media, a conflict that had been brewing for years but had just found its newest symbol in Caroline Leavitt. What started as a routine debate on immigration policies had spiraled into a national conversation about bias, censorship, and the role of the media in shaping political narratives. Conservatives saw CNN's decision to cut off the interview as undeniable proof of media manipulation, while liberals insisted that it was simply an editorial decision based on Leavitt's refusal to give direct answers. But regardless of political affiliation, one thing was clear. This moment had deepened the divide between conservative America and the press in a way that would have lasting consequences. The fallout from the interview set a new precedent for political debates, making future conservative guests more aggressive in pushing back against mainstream media hosts. Republican politicians and commentators took note of Leavitt's success and began adopting a similar strategy, challenging the interviewer's authority, reframing the narrative, and calling out perceived bias directly on air. The lesson was clear. Fighting the media wasn't just about defending conservative ideas. It was a winning political strategy. Meanwhile, CNN and other left-leaning networks struggled with the optics of the situation. Even among moderates, the abrupt ending of the interview looked bad, reinforcing long-held suspicions that legacy media couldn't handle real debate. For Trump's campaign, the moment was a gift, proving that the fight against fake news was still a powerful rallying cry. The controversy energized the conservative base, driving engagement, media coverage, and fundraising. More importantly, it positioned Caroline Leavitt as a rising conservative star, someone who could hold her own against the media and come out stronger. In the end, CNN hadn't just lost control of an interview. They had lost control of the narrative itself, and the battle between politicians and the press had just entered a new and even more combative era. The controversy surrounding Caroline Leavitt's CNN interview reveals a powerful lesson that extends far beyond politics. It highlights the importance of standing firm in one's beliefs, recognizing bias, and understanding the influence of media narratives. For many seniors who have spent decades witnessing political shifts, media evolution, and societal changes, this moment serves as a reminder of why critical thinking and independent judgment are essential in today's fast-paced world. The rise of instant news and social media has created an environment where information is constantly being shaped, edited, and filtered. This makes it even more important to question what we hear, verify facts, and avoid being swayed by emotional arguments or carefully crafted media spin. Experience teaches us that the loudest voice is not always the most truthful one, and it is up to each individual to seek out deeper understanding beyond surface-level headlines. One of the biggest takeaways from this situation is the importance of resilience in the face of opposition. Caroline Leavitt walked into that CNN interview as just another campaign spokesperson, but because she refused to be intimidated, manipulated, or silenced, she emerged as a stronger, more influential figure. This is a lesson that applies not only to politics, but to everyday life. Throughout our lives, we will all encounter situations where people try to discredit us, dismiss our experiences, or push us into silence. Whether it's in family discussions, community debates, or even personal conflicts, the ability to stand confidently, express thoughts clearly, and refuse to be bullied into submission is a skill that matters at every age. The value of experience cannot be overstated. Those who have lived through decades of change understand that public opinion is fleeting, but integrity is lasting. Additionally, this event reinforces the power of thoughtful discourse and respectful debate. In today's world, where conversations often turn into heated arguments, many people, especially seniors, have noticed a decline in respectful dialogue. Too often, discussions become about winning the argument rather than understanding different perspectives. The ability to listen, reason, and respond thoughtfully is a quality that many older generations have mastered through years of experience. This is an important skill to pass down to younger generations, encouraging them to engage in meaningful conversations rather than emotional reactions. Whether discussing politics, societal issues, or personal matters, maintaining a calm and measured approach ensures that our voices are heard rather than dismissed. Ultimately, this controversy underscores a fundamental truth. Those who control the narrative often shape history, but those who refuse to be silenced shape the future. Seniors, having lived through times of political and social upheaval, hold a unique position to guide others toward wisdom, encourage thoughtful discussion, and remind younger generations that real leadership is about truth, not popularity. The key lesson here is that the world will always have competing voices, but the most important one is your own. Use it wisely, boldly, and with conviction.